Right then, let's talk Silverstone, let's talk the British Grand Prix, let's talk the home of Formula 1. Just for a few minutes, because, there wasn't anything that generated any headlines this weekend. Was there? I think we have to start with the end of the weekend, don't we? Look, I'm a Lewis Hamilton fan. I'm still traumatised by a sassy Australian man forgetting how to read the rules and making stuff up on the go. I'm with Toto Wolff. I'm happy the rules were applied this time. Now, are they particularly good rules? I don't know. I've never had an issue with F1 ending a race behind a safety car. One of the greatest championship finales that I ever watched was 2012, which ended behind a safety car. One of the greatest Brazilian Grand Prix of all time in 2003 as well, that was not a season finale, ended with a red flag under the safety car. And proceeded to see the winning car burn down in the pit lane. It was... yeah. I get why people are annoyed, especially when it was like safety car in this lap. But I have a feeling that we're starting to get a bit too, NASCAR-y. IndyCar will end the Indy 500 under caution if it has to. In terms of, racing series that have overtime, it's pretty much NASCAR that does it. And you don't want to be in a situation like they were in... oh gosh, was it Kansas or Nashville? I can't remember. It was in 24. It was the race that Joey Logano won in the regular season that locked him into the playoffs, which put him on the path to winning the championship. Despite being, way down the order in the stats. It was even in the top 5 in 24? I can't remember off the top of my head. Because we had a half dozen overtimes. Heck, they had that at COTA one year, didn't they? They went into, triple overtime. I wouldn't want that for Formula 1. I'd much rather the IndyCar approach. They don't try to end under a green in 24 hours of Le Mans, 24 hours of Nürburgring, 24 hours of Spa. So why should an F1 race have to end under green? I get the annoyance. I do. I get the rules aren't exactly clear. Maybe they'll shake them up. You've got Mohammed Ben Sulayem, who is the leader of the FIA. His first thing that he had to deal with when he came in was Abu Dhabi 21, because he was elected at the start of December 2021. He's somebody who's known to make rash decisions, just reacting to things like a weather vane. Who knows, maybe suddenly there's an extraordinary meeting at the World Motorsport Council and he gets rid of this after the lap cars are allowed to lap. You've got one lap and then you go green. I get why people are mad. I mean, like I said, I'm a Lewis Hamilton fan. He would have passed George Russell, most likely. And heck, maybe Lando Norris would have passed George Russell and Lewis Hamilton would be back into second in the driver's standings. But don't be mad the FIA actually caught themselves messing up their own rules. We want them to get things right. But I think we have to speak about the Grand Prix winner, right? Charles Leclerc has not won for, was it 20 months, I heard, is the last time that he won. It's wild. It's wild to think that. But it was deserved. And I'm happy because it means I can tick off my thing saying at least two teams will have both drivers win races this season. Granted, they are the only two teams to have won races this season. I was expecting there to be more. But both Ferraris have won a Grand Prix. And Leclerc was comfortably the better Ferrari this weekend as well. Lewis had the measure of him during the sprint portion, but when it came to the actual Grand Prix part, the Monegasque driver had the measure of the Brit. And I don't think there's any shame in admitting that. Leclerc has had a rotten run of form as of late, so seeing him back in form and being able to beat his teammate is good. Especially because there have been so many different issues that Ferrari have had this season. We were expecting them to be so off the pace here. Ferrari themselves expect themselves to be 6/10 off. And yeah, they maybe benefited from Mercedes' misfortune, which we'll talk about in a moment. But when you look at everything, Lewis got the sprint pole. He led a notable amount of the sprint and finished comfortably second place. Leclerc got fifth in the sprint. In qualifying, they were second and third, quite comfortably. And then the race, it could have been a 1-2, had they played their cards right. Look, sure, Mercedes were ultimately incredibly unfortunate. Somehow Antonelli, with his 5-second penalty at the end of the race, sandwiches himself between the two Cadillacs. But George Russell, suspected puncher, and then Antonelli with the with that like brake duct or fairing coming off and getting lodged in the suspension. It was just bad luck. Maybe it's because of how Mercedes had set their cars off in terms of stiffness that you end up with both of them having some kind of things that you could argue is related to the curbs. Total Wolf doesn't believe that. I'm sure in the coming days we'll find something out that will say, okay, maybe it was that. But, yeah. I do feel for Andrea Kimi Antonelli. Like, he pulled up at the end of the race, and he kept the helmet on until he was out of the camera sight. You saw him put his gloves inside of his helmet when he parked up as well. That lad is going to be a world champion someday. I just know it. And, yeah, he may be seeing that championship lead evaporate, but when he has a good weekend, he knows how to drive these cars better than anyone else right now. I'm sure he'll bounce back. I'm sure he will, after a couple of bad weekends, a couple of unlucky weekends, find his groove again, get himself back to the front, and then just push. Let's talk the rest of the point scorers then. Let's go with who scored in the sprint first. Lando got third. He got a podium, which is good for him. And McLaren Verstappen got sixth. We'll talk about Verstappen in a moment. Piastri got seventh. And then eighth went the way of Liam Lawson, beating out Isaac Hadjar. The top 10 in the sprint was rounded out by Arvid Lindblad. And then in the Grand Prix itself, it went the way of Hadjar in fifth, behind Norris in fourth. Lawson and Lindblad sixth and seventh for the second week in the row, right? And then behind them, Gabriel Bortoletto, 4 points for Audi. And a double point score for Alpine. Colapinto in 9th, Gasly in 10th. It's good for Audi to get points on the board. Racing Bulls have started to pronounce themselves as this midfield team to have. And Audi, it's impressive. Remember, coming into this weekend, they were only 1 point clear of Aston Martin. Aston Martin 1 point, Audi with 2 points. But thanks to a wild and wonderful weekend, we've ended up with a massive swing in that sort of F1.5, as some people might call it. But let's briefly talk Max Verstappen to wrap this up, because this video's nearly gone on for 10 minutes, as of what it's showing on the recording here. Rotten luck for a second week in a row, and I was listening to the Races podcast on this. Apparently, it was a similar kind of problem, but slightly different in Austria, which was the problem with Red Bull's rear wing. Now, that rear wing, what are they calling it? I've heard Macarena rear wing. That's what I've heard the most. Your rear wing has to close within 0.4 of a second of the mechanism being triggered. And the good thing about that kind of rear wing is it can also act as a bit of a brake, the way it deflects air. But apparently, part of the problem that Red Bull has had, or at least Verstappen has had with that Red Bull, has been the closing of the gap. So that's why he's had spins in high-speed corners at the end of straight mode zones the last couple of weeks. Supposedly, according to the race, in Austria, it was the way that it closed. They felt that there was a little bit of air that unsettled the rear end of the car. And then in Silverstone, it hadn't fully closed by the time he turned in. That's why it stalls, rear end goes, he's in the gravel. But I just find it kind of funny that Verstappen has now spun 2 years in a row in Stowe. Maybe it's just one of those pet peeve corners for him. But, yeah, it was bad luck. And obviously you can't really deal with a lack of confidence in the car. So if you really are struggling for confidence, as Max seems to be, if you listen to his team radios, if you listen to his interviews, it really hurts you when you try to push to the front of the field. Well, I reckon that's that for this video, folks. I haven't really covered the standings, but strangely enough, it's now Merc 1-2, 179 to 154, Ferrari 3-4, 147 to 108, McLaren 5-6, 97 to 82, Red Bull 7-8, 76 to 52. Which means in the team standings, unsurprisingly, Merc on 333, Ferrari on 255, McLaren on 179, and Red Bull on 128. Let me know what narrative stood out for you over the course of the weekend, folks. Let me know what kind of storylines, because there are a lot that I missed that you'd like to pick up on. But as always, thanks for watching, thanks for joining, thank you for your continued support on this channel, and until next time, bye-bye for now.